It had become an industrial war in which the size of the guns, more and more gigantic, played a vital part. Since the infantry could not break through the enemy line, Foch declared, "We must march over ruins." In Artois and Champagne, 250,000 more men died in Joffre's two offensives in 1915 in vain. The Germans did not take this as a lesson. They decided to attack at Verdun. The French army stood still and the German command wanted to bleed it to death. They planned to destroy Verdun with bombs so that the German infantry could advance over corpses. The attack started at dawn on February the 21st, 1916, with the most intensive bombardment of the war. "900 guns, fired for 100 hours on an 8-mile front. With each shell, the landscape changed. One gun was so loud that most of the crew had to retire into the shelters. But there were still survivors to bar the way of the German infantry. A mountain of shell cases for one day's fighting. Hand-to-hand combat sometimes ended with spades or pickaxes when there were no more munitions. The use of gas did not break the stalemate. The Germans did not pass. The shout of gas created a complete panic when the Germans used it for the first time the previous year. Men died like flies, vomiting and choking with their throats on fire. The French staff was completely overtaken by events. The first form of protection was simply a wet cloth over the face. Gas masks did not come until later. Strangely, the French did not protest. To Foch, this was simply a new weapon, and they had to learn to use it efficiently. French chemists, in turn, set to work. The atrocities of the 20th century started in 1915. The Allies lost 250,000 men at Verdun, and the Germans nearly as many. As if it had not been enough horror and destruction, it was General Nivelle's turn to promise certain victory. He was determined to break through at Le Chemin des Dames between Reims and Soissons. It was another failure, costing another 270,000 lives. This time it was too much. Nerves were giving way. The war had been going on for nearly 4 years. Suddenly, several mutinies broke out. In the general's eyes, it was a refusal to fight. 500 men were sentenced to death, though only 43 were executed. Pétain promised to end useless offensives, and morale improved. Clemenceau came to power on a platform of war with no concessions. The politicians and the generals were now waiting for the tanks and the Americans. The United States entered the war like crusaders to free the oppressed nations of the old continent. But America was concerned about the comfort and the safety of her soldiers and for their moral welfare, too. General Pershing asked for the docks to be cleared of dubious characters and loose women when his soldiers arrived. France gave them a particularly warm welcome. On Sundays, people came with their children to meet these soldiers who were so friendly. The authorities gave reception after reception. They find these American soldiers more modern than those of Europe. For instance, their pilots trained on strange machines. Pétain, the victor of Verdun, now commanded the French forces. He wanted to start by economizing manpower and coordinating action by the artillery, aircraft, and tanks. The Germans did not believe in the tank. It is true that this assault artillery made a hesitant beginning. They often broke down, stuck in clay, and became an easy prey for artillery. This is the birth of modern warfare, tanks and infantry. The French had Schneiders, Saint-Chamonts, and Renaults. The British had their own, much heavier. Foch became commander-in-chief for the first time in March 1918, with all the Allied forces under his control. It was to be a crucial decision. War also entered the third dimension. Aircraft showed the gunners where to aim, bombed the enemy lines, and engaged in the first air combats. The final German offensive collapsed. Ludendorff, convinced that victory was within reach, had launched 1 million men on 3 fronts. He failed 3 times, but only just, particularly on the Somme, where the soldiers fought back heroically. August the 8th, 1918, was a day of mourning for the entire German army. Its courage was not in doubt. But this time, it was the home front that gave way. Starving, ruined, and shaken by revolutionary uprisings, Germany sued for an armistice. Everything was finally over on November 11th, 1918. France was victorious because she had been united as perhaps never before or after. Germany was defeated, but Europe, with 9 million dead, had lost its lifeblood. 1,400,000 French soldiers, 1,950,000 Germans, 1,700,000 Russians, 1 million Austrians, 800,000 British, 500,000 Italians, 115,000 Americans, 44,000 Belgians, and how many civilians?